B. Collins.
Peter B. Collins, news and comment. It's Friday, March 29th, 2019. I believe it's Brexit Day. And we'll get to that mess in the United Kingdom somewhere in today's podcast, I promise. But we lead with Trump, the guy who cannot get out of his own way, who steps on his own political victories and squanders some of the goodwill, if you can call it that he occasionally encounters. So this week, after being, as he claims, exonerated by Robert Mueller, that's not true, of course, but that's what he claims, he's been able to control the news cycle with the spin provided by Bill Barr, his instant attorney general, and to his base in that mob rally in Grand Rapids, Michigan last night. Trump has endured the victimization and come out stronger than before, right? But then he turns around in his impulsiveness and his viciousness. It costs him. So yesterday, for example, Kirstjen Nielsen, whom he has threatened to fire repeatedly as his Homeland Security Secretary, made an announcement that she'd been meeting with the countries in the so-called Northern Triangle of Central America, Honduras, El Salvador, Guatemala. Here's her tweet. I am pleased to announce the U.S. and our Northern Triangle allies have reached a historic, all caps, agreement to confront the root causes of the crisis on our border. Working with Central American governments to increase security and prosperity in the region has been one of my greatest priorities. So, I have no objection to the U.S. trying to reduce the flow of immigrants to our country by improving conditions that they are fleeing from, particularly in those three countries. And I want to quote from an email that came in unsolicited from our friend and benefactor, John Zwiebel in Hawaii. And his title, his subject line reads, "The USA is the cause of the Mexican border crisis." And he has 7 lines here. If Clinton hadn't overthrown the government of Honduras, if Trump weren't threatening to invade Venezuela, if Reagan and Bush 1 hadn't put pressure on Nicaragua, if Carter and Reagan hadn't overthrown the government of El Salvador, if several administrations hadn't continued to fund the corrupt Drug Enforcement Agency, and if the CIA hadn't been supporting the overthrow of the Guatemala government in 1954. And John couldn't have read my mind, but yesterday I'd hoped to bring you an interview with Dan Kovalik. We were unable to connect because he is in Venezuela, in Caracas, and we think the internet was down. He did text me a little bit later that power has been very spotty. And his new book is called The Plot to Control the World. He details the role the U.S. has played in meddling in elections, destabilizing governments, and staging outright coups, including the one in Guatemala that Mr. Zwiebel refers to. Those are the root causes of the unstable governments, the poverty, the crime, the violence that causes people to pack up their entire families and take the risk that they can get over the U.S. border before Trump pulls up the drawbridge at Fortress America. And I am as surprised as anyone that despite the zero tolerance, the family separation, the hostage-taking, not only of the dreamers, but of migrants heading to this country claiming political asylum, we never address the underlying causes. And so Kirstjen Nielsen, to some credit, actually is trying to address that. But her boss intervened shortly thereafter and attacked those 3 countries. And he added Mexico, too, because Mexico is doing nothing to stem the flow of immigrants illegally entering the United States. He imagines that they should harden their southern border. In fact, the new leader of Mexico has ordered some of his troops to their southern border. But Trump imagines that fear, intimidation, violence, repressive measures like a wall, that's going to stop this human flow. And it's simply not rational. And today, he ratcheted up again, calling on Mexico to stop all illegal immigration, threatening that he will close large swaths or all of our southern border as early as next week if the Mexican government doesn't immediately stop all undocumented migrants. Now, he's made this threat before. He did it during the government shutdown around Christmas and earlier this week. But we don't know how empty or full this threat might be. And some of this is apparently prompted by the crowd reaction in Grand Rapids last night, where he went on an extensive angry screed about immigration, calling the problem an invasion and referring to the plight of asylum seekers as a big fat con job. And that's just how vicious this man is. He cannot relate to those who risk so much. And particularly the big trend is that people are coming as families. Now, the other issue that Trump has stepped on his own feet on is health care. And Mick Mulvaney, in a contested cabinet meeting, we're told on Monday, carried the argument that Trump should weigh in on the appeal coming from Texas of the lower court decision that declared Obamacare entirely unconstitutional. That, of course, flies in the face of the Supreme Court decision a few years ago, but because the individual mandate was removed, this judge found that he could rule in that manner. Now, this creates real problems for Trump and his own party because he has continued to double and triple down by saying that the Republicans are going to come up with a beautiful health care plan. And that once they knock out Obamacare, we're all going to be just so happy with what they put together. And on Capitol Hill, they point fingers at the White House. Well, he said Republicans are going to become the party of health care, and they've got, we got Mitch McConnell and House leaders saying, we're very excited to see what the White House has put together. But everybody knows the Republicans don't have a clue. They want to take out Obamacare and let people die. Let millions of people go without health insurance in this country. They describe any effort to involve the government in the delivery of health insurance as socialism that cannot be countenanced. And today, a federal judge in Washington dealt another setback to Trump. This is Judge John D. Bates in the District of Columbia. His ruling blocks new rules from the Trump administration overseeing association health plans, which would allow small businesses to offer plans that don't meet the standards of the Affordable Care Act. They'd be less expensive and provide shitty coverage. My words, not theirs. Bates, who was appointed by W., says the final rule is clearly an end run around the ACA. Indeed, as the president directed and the Secretary of Labor confirmed, the final rule was designed to expand access to these associations to avoid the most stringent requirements of the ACA. Now, this has energized Democrats who are eager to pivot away from their failed Russiagate gambit and take on this issue. And I will get to that in a second. I wanted to mention that the other impulsive move of Trump in the last few days threw billionaire Betsy DeVos under the limo. A bus wouldn't be good enough for her. Because after she took the heat, backing his policy to cut all of the federal funding for the Special Olympics Trump played good cop. And he announced at that rally in Michigan yesterday, I want to fund the Special Olympics. I just authorized a funding of the Special Olympics. I've been to the Special Olympics. I think it's incredible. I just authorized a funding. I heard about it this morning. I have overridden my people. We are funding the Special Olympics. This was in Grand Rapids. That's Betsy DeVos's backyard. Oh, it's incredible. Now, to the Democratic pivot. Nancy Pelosi introduced legislation this week to strengthen the Affordable Care Act. It can pass the House easily. Probably has really bad prospects in the Senate. Bernie Sanders is one of the holdouts. When asked Tuesday night whether he supported the House bill, he just said no. When pressed, he said no. The incremental reform that I support is phasing in Medicare for all. And listen to this biased reporting from the New York Times. This is a news report, not an analytical or op-ed. Mr. Sanders' unflinching position is a reminder to voters that he is unabashedly left-wing and unlikely to worry about working within the confines of the existing system anytime soon. It also reflects a schism within the Democratic Party over the best way to recapture power in Washington. Bold steps or baby steps. And that last part is a fair assessment. But to describe Sanders as unflinching, unabashedly left-wing, unlikely to worry about working within the system, we know how the New York Times views Senator Sanders and his latest campaign for president. So I'm not opposed to trying to protect Obamacare. As you know, I believe that it is fatally flawed. It's a Republican plan that Obama embraced. It subsidizes the pharma industry and the useless health insurance industry. It enables all kinds of profiteering on people's sickness. And it doesn't control costs. Medicare for All would address all of those concerns. In New York State, investigators for the Attorney General believe that the Sackler family, the drug syndicate family that has profited massively from America's addiction to OxyContin and related drugs, well, this white-collar drug syndicate also has a looter component. Members of the family are accused of shifting hundreds of millions of dollars from the business to themselves through offshore entities. And they've been doing this since 2007. When regulators first sounded the alarm about the wave of addiction to their product. The Sacklers are immensely wealthy. It's in the billions and billions of dollars. This week they settled with I think it's Oklahoma, for a measly $275 million. And the state settled because they're afraid that the Sacklers have looted the company and will soon declare bankruptcy at Purdue Pharma. So we'll be watching that one carefully. I hope eventually that the Sacklers will be held to account and their fortune will be diverted to help those who are addicted to their products. Well, some of the Democrats didn't get the memo to pivot. Yesterday, Adam Schiff threw a little drama, kind of a hissy fit, at the opening of a hearing of the House Intelligence Committee. And Republicans who call for not only him stepping down as chair, but also resigning from Congress because he has promoted the Russiagate narrative. Well, here was his response. You might think that it's okay that the president's son-in-law sought to establish a secret back channel of communications with the Russians through a Russian diplomatic facility. I don't think that's okay. You might think it's okay that an associate of the president made direct contact with the GRU through Guccifer 2.0 and WikiLeaks. That is considered a hostile intelligence agency. Well, I don't agree with his characterizations there, but I'll quote some more. You might think that it's okay that the national security designate secretly conferred with the Russian ambassador about undermining U.S. sanctions. And you might think it's okay he lied about it to the FBI. You might say that's all okay. You might say that's just what you need to do to win. But I don't think it's okay. I think it's immoral. I think it's unethical. I think it's unpatriotic. And yes, I think it's corrupt. Now, all this sounds good. His theatrical outrage is calculated to keep the Russiagate story alive. And today, I am releasing an in-depth interview with Peter Van Buren, the State Department whistleblower. And like me, he has been an ongoing skeptic from the beginning of the Russiagate narrative. He's a member of Veterans Intelligence Professionals for Sanity. He is a supporter of Bill Binney's theories about whether or not the DNC was the subject of a hack. Binney believes it was a leak, and he has some evidence. We still have no public evidence of the claim in the Mueller report as translated by Bill Barr that it was Russian agents who hacked the DNC. Here's an excerpt from my conversation with Peter Van Buren, where he talks about his ideas of why Trump fired James Comey.
We don't know what was said in that meeting, but we do know that 4 days later, after sitting on the dossier for months, 4 days after the Comey meeting, BuzzFeed publishes the whole dossier, which opens the floodgates. Everybody in America learns what a golden shower is. And then, as if on cue, now people like Brennan and Clapper and Hayden and others start appearing in the media, either in person or as unnamed sources, basically saying the dossier may have some validity to it. And if you're Donald Trump and don't see this as either a blackmail attempt or a power play by the FBI right out of the Hoover playbook, then you're blind, because it clearly was. And that really is where the genesis, I think, of firing Comey comes from. If you were the president of the United States, could you, in fact, have confidence in your director of the FBI, knowing that he had purposely withheld information from you and used it against you until basically it had run its course and had no validity left to it? How could you keep that guy in your administration? I think it took a while to actually cause the firing to happen, but I think it had a lot to do with firing James Comey.
I invite you to listen to the full interview with Peter Van Buren. It's available for subscribers today at peterbcollins.com, at iTunes, TuneIn, Stitcher, and Spreaker. Runs a little under an hour, and we cover most of the waterfront related to the so-called Russiagate scandal, and we do have some points of disagreement. He doesn't think the obstruction counts, as I do, are that strong, and as a result, Van Buren thinks that impeachment is not viable. So I think you'll find it interesting. He's a very funny and well-informed guy, and I always enjoy chatting with Mr. Van Buren, the former State Department analyst. Also, I want to thank the people who support my work like I do every day here at the Peter B. Collins Podcast through your subscriptions, like Benny Alto, Carla Mahoney, Ben Brotman, and Patrick Garay. I really appreciate your support. And for those of you who have never kicked in even a nickel, you can do it. It's not too late. All you have to do is visit peterbcollins.com, click on menu, click on Become a Subscriber. You'll hit the sign-up page, and it's easy to choose $5, $10, $20 a month, whatever fits your budget. And I have bonus books. The book called Trump on the Couch by psychiatrist Justin Frank is available for the next two annual subscribers, new annual subscribers who give me a mailing address in the continental U.S. In today's New York Times, they permitted a Russian journalist, Alexei Kovalev, to publish an opinion piece with the headline, "Russians always knew there was no collusion." Last week, when the news broke that Mueller had finished his report, Moscow's political and media circles reacted with a mixture of contempt and derision. Far from being a top news story, it was practically forgotten after a few angry comments from state officials. Alexei Pushkov, a former diplomat and political analyst, tweeted to his 360,000 followers, "The results of Mueller's investigation are a disgrace to the U.S. and their political elite. It's now confirmed that all their allegations have been plucked out of thin air. The media have played a shameful role of liemongers in a campaign built on lies. the adherents of this conspiracy theory are discredited. Only an idiot can believe them now. Well, this is an expected perspective. They have a right to gloat. They've been demonized. I want to make it clear that I have no illusions about Russia or Putin. But these fanciful claims that he's the one who tilted the election to Trump have never matched with evidence or honest analysis of the American political scene. And this Russian journalist closes his opinion piece by saying, "We have few illusions about our own government, its dirty dealings abroad, or our own toxic media. But we expected better of America." I have another podcast for you to catch up with this weekend or whenever time permits. It's over at Who, What, Why, and it's an interview with Stephen Volker. He's the veteran environmental lawyer who won the case blocking construction of the Keystone XL pipeline. And he explains the details of that ruling at the appeals court level, and he speculates that the likely appeal by TransCanada to the United States Supreme Court will be based on a claim that Trump's presidential permit is not reviewable by the courts, effectively placing the president above the law. Here's an excerpt from my conversation with Stephen Volker.
What the Trump administration has been arguing through its Department of Justice and what TransCanada, which is a corporation from Canada, has been arguing is that because the Trump administration issued what it calls a presidential permit, that presidential action is above the law. It's beyond the jurisdiction of any federal court to examine whether, in issuing that approval, the Trump administration violated federal environmental law, including the National Environmental Policy Act, the Endangered Species Act, the Administrative Procedure Act, and other statutes and regulations that bind all of the actions of federal agencies. We have argued successfully in this case and in another groundbreaking case involving a transboundary energy project on our Mexican border that the Trump administration is not above the law, that its actions should be considered subject to the full panoply of federal environmental statutes, and Judge Morris has agreed with that, and by denying TransCanada's request for a stay of the injunction, the Ninth Circuit has signaled its agreement that federal courts do have jurisdiction. So if I were a betting man, I would expect that it's more likely than not that if TransCanada seeks review in the U.S. Supreme Court, they will tell the court that the Trump administration is above law and that none of the statutes that were violated here even apply to this presidential permit. And unfortunately, the Justice Department will tag along and second TransCanada's very unsavory position that the president of this country is not subject to the laws of this country.
Well, Steve, I'm shocked at the imperial claim that is presented there.
It's breathtaking, and it's terrifying, and it's something that we will leave no stone unturned to defeat.
That's attorney Steve Volker talking about the Keystone XL pipeline and the likely appeals coming up to the U.S. Supreme Court. You can listen to it right now at whowhatwhy.org. Well, Britain continues to be a mess here on deadline day for Brexit. The deadline will be extended at least until April 12th. That would be the no-deal exit that Theresa May has been trying desperately to avoid. And they split up her package to comply with the parliamentary rules to allow a third vote. And it was rejected again, narrowly, at least compared to the other votes, about a 50-vote margin. Now, even with the sweetener that Theresa May said she would step down if you just passed this bloody thing, well, narrowed the gap, but it didn't complete it. And so April 12th appears to be the date The European Union has indicated that they would only agree to a much longer extension, which appears to be anathema in Britain because it would require them to vote in the EU elections coming up in the next couple of months. And frankly, I have never seen a government that practices some form of democracy, and it's not pure democracy, but I've never seen a government get this bogged down. This is a self-induced crisis. And it's because the preceding Prime Minister, Cameron, thought he could win a Brexit vote and put this to rest. It cost him his prime ministership. It's going to cost Theresa May hers. And it appears that it's going to be a big setback for the United Kingdom. You may have heard of Hal Martin. A couple of years ago, the FBI raided his home near Baltimore, and they found terabytes of classified information that this NSA contractor took home from work. Now, it's illegal for him to do so, and people like Tom Drake were threatened under the Espionage Act for having classified information on a personal computer, and others have received really stiff punishment as well. But Hal Martin negotiated a plea deal. His lawyer said he was just an eccentric hoarder, a man with a mental illness, not guilty of treason. So he has pled guilty to a single charge of taking classified documents home and is expected to get a sentence, I think, of as long as 9 years. And they are clarifying that he was not responsible for the leak of hacking tools called Vault 7. He was suspected at a certain point when they arrested him. In a court in Luxembourg, a long-shot lawsuit by Americans to ding Iran for 9/11 has failed. The $1.6 billion claim was based on an uncontested verdict that came from a U.S. court where Iran did not participate. And they thought that this kind of a default judgment would be something they could collect on. They argued, and I don't know what this is based on, that Iran assisted al-Qaeda by facilitating travel of its operatives through Iranian territory. I really, even if you believe the official story of 9/11 and the 9/11 Commission report, I don't see how that squares with any of the official narrative out there. Today, the New York Times posted a lengthy analytical piece. It runs 39 pages, and I haven't read it all. I think it's going to be in the Sunday New York Times Magazine. And the headline reads, "How the Battle Over Israel and Anti-Semitism is Fracturing American Politics." And in the opening pages, they talk about the battle over the Democratic platform in 2016, how Bernie Sanders representatives, including Cornel West and James Zogby, were pressing for a more balanced approach, supporting BDS, boycott, divestment, and sanctions. And it was the Hillary Clinton team, led by former Congressman Bob Wexler of Florida, a very staunch Zionist, who carried the day. And the platform didn't include any of those more progressive positions, progressive from my point of view. And the article goes on to identify the divide in the United States, driven by the younger members of Congress, including Ilhan Omar, who have a very different view than the Democratic leaders about Israel. And this played out this week with AIPAC, where Pelosi and Steny Hoyer and other top Democrats went and took a knee and expressed their devotion to the state of Israel, and they all denounced BDS. I find that very undemocratic and unconstitutional. And I encourage you to read the full piece. I'll check it out on Sunday and see if I have comments for you on Monday. If you're a regular listener, you know that I am very concerned about the future of what I call our rogue utility here in Northern California, Pacific Gas and Electric. They're in bankruptcy. They are defined as a criminal enterprise because of their negligence, and they're facing tons of lawsuits from the wildfires blamed on their facilities in the last 2 years. So Governor Newsom, who just took office in January, wrote a really strong letter to PG&E this week because he learned that they're going to put new members on their board of directors, and Newsom described it this way. PG&E would send a clear message that is prioritizing quick profits for Wall Street over public safety and reliable and affordable energy service. Time and again, PG&E has broken the public trust in its responsibilities to ratepayers, wildfire victims, and employees. This board appears to be more of the same. And his criticism is that they're putting hedge fund people on who are much more interested in profits than in safety and operations. And a company called Blue Mountain Capital Management that owns millions of PG&E shares has nominated its own slate of 13 candidates. And Newsom wants them to be California residents who have some relevant experience to trying to fix this troubled utility. The disruptors are going public. Today was the IPO for Lyft, the company that uses an app to displace taxi cabs. They call it ride-hailing, and I think that term is ridiculous. At any rate, the IPO opened at $72 and rose to $87.24, which makes the company worth more than $24 billion. That's more than United Airlines, for example. And Lyft doesn't own anything. They don't own the vehicles. They don't have employees. They have software. And the way the company is structured, the two founders, Logan Green and John Zimmer, will own 49%. And they will have massive control of the voting shares of the company. It's the same model as Google and Facebook. And I think these are bad bets because the investors have no rights. You're just along for the ride. And I didn't mean to say that. Finally today, have you seen the video? I think Trevor Noah had it the other night on The Daily Show. Pope Francis was greeting a line of lay people. And they would come and, good Catholics know that bishops and cardinals and the Pope wear a holy ring. And to show your respect, you're supposed to kiss the ring. But Pope Francis is uncomfortable doing that in public. He appears to be okay having priests and nuns kiss his ring. But if you see the video, as people approach, he tries to extend his hand for a handshake, and the supplicants try to kiss it. And he pulls it away and moves his left hand in for a block. And it's really comical to see. And people trying to explain the Pope's actions say that in some cases he's worried about spreading germs, and in other cases, he says he's making sure that they engage with him, not treat him like a sacred relic. He's the vicar of Christ, not a Roman emperor. All right? I won't kiss the ring, I promise. Thanks for listening to my daily news and comment podcast. You're free to share it far and wide. You'll find it on YouTube. And I'm still Peter B. Collins. I've never ridden in Lyft.
Happy trails to you until we meet again. Happy trails to you. Keep smiling.